The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. Inside its gleaming halls, the most powerful beings in the galaxy gathered for their monthly meeting. The Galactic Council had ruled space for thousands of years, and today they would decide the fate of a small, unknown world called Earth. Dae-ho Kim stood outside the council chambers, adjusting his simple black suit. He had been Earth's best military strategist before becoming a diplomat, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The doors in front of him were 20 feet tall and made from some crystal that seemed to glow with its own light. Beyond those, doors waited creatures that could destroy his entire planet with a single word. "Are you ready, Ambassador?" asked Sujin Park, the chief scientist of their small delegation. Her voice was steady, but Dae-ho could see the worry in her eyes. She carried a data pad filled with information about Earth's achievements, their art, their science, their hopes for joining the galactic community. As ready as anyone can be when they're about to ask gods for permission to exist, Dae-ho replied quietly. The third member of their team, Captain Woo-Jin Lee, said nothing. He simply nodded once, his hand resting near the ceremonial sword he wore as part of his dress uniform. The weapon was useless here, but it reminded all three humans of their home world and the billions of people counting on them. The crystal doors slid open without a sound. The council chamber was enormous, with curved walls that stretched up into shadows. Strange lights floated in the air, casting everything in shades of blue and silver. At the center of the room sat three massive forms that made Dae-ho's breath catch in his throat. The first was a Vorthak, a being made entirely of living crystal. It stood 12 feet tall, its body constantly shifting and changing as new crystal formations grew and dissolved. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "So these are the humans," it said, and somehow the words carried notes of amusement. "They are even smaller than the reports indicated." The second council member belonged to the Kalari, a race that had given up individual bodies long ago. What sat before the humans was a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, all connected to a single shared mind. When the Kalari spoke, hundreds of voices whispered in perfect harmony. "We have reviewed their application. Their technology is primitive. Their lifespans are brief. Their society is chaotic and disorganized." The third being was hardest to look at directly. The Threnody had evolved beyond physical form, existing as pure energy contained in a roughly humanoid shape. It pulsed with different colors as it thought, and when it spoke, the words seemed to come from everywhere at once. They still live on a single planet. They have not even learned to think as one mind. Why have they come before us? Dae-ho stepped forward and bowed deeply as protocol demanded. "Honored Council, we come seeking membership in the galactic community. Earth has achieved faster-than-light travel. We have much to offer and much to learn." The Vorthak's crystal body rang like a bell as it laughed. "Offer? What could a species that discovered fire only yesterday possibly offer us? You have been using tools for a few thousand years. We have been crossing the stars for millions." Sujin Park moved to Dae-ho's side, her datapad ready. "We have made significant advances in several fields. Our music, our literature, our scientific theories about quantum mechanics and—" Silence. The Kalari's 100 voices spoke as one, cutting her off. "We have examined your so-called achievements. Your music is noise. Your literature is the confused rambling of minds that cannot connect properly. Your science is the fumbling of children playing with dangerous toys." The Threnody's energy form brightened, cycling through angry reds and dismissive yellows. "Most concerning of all is your attachment to that single world. Advanced species expand beyond their birth planets quickly. They learn to think of the galaxy as their home. But you humans cling to Earth like frightened children to their mother's skirts." Dae-ho felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. Earth is not a weakness. It is our strength. Every human carries their home world in their heart, no matter how far they travel. This gives us something to fight for, something to protect. Fight? The Vorthak's laughter grew louder. You speak of fighting as if it is something to be proud of. Advanced beings resolve conflicts through logic and negotiation. Only primitive species resort to violence. Captain Woojin Lee spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. And what happens when logic and negotiation fail? What happens when you meet an enemy that cannot be reasoned with? The three council members exchanged looks of amusement. The Kalari answered with their chorus of voices. Such situations do not arise when one is sufficiently advanced. Violence is the tool of the simple-minded. It is inefficient and destructive. Your entire species, the Threnody continued, appears to be driven by emotion rather than rational thought. You make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. You form personal bonds that cloud your judgment. You even wage war against members of your own species over resources and ideologies. Sujin Park tried again to present their achievements, but the Vorthak waved a crystal hand dismissively. We have made our decision. Humanity will be granted probationary observer status. You may attend council meetings as silent witnesses. You may not vote on matters of galactic importance. Your ships may travel established trade routes under escort. Your colonies may be established only in pre-approved sectors. In other words, the Kalari added with their 100-voice whisper, you will be our pets, amusing creatures to observe as you slowly learn to become civilized. The Threnodi's form pulsed with condescending blues and greens. Think of it as an educational opportunity. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when you have learned to control your emotions and think logically, we may reconsider your status. Daiho bowed again, though every muscle in his body screamed against the gesture. We accept the Council's generous offer. May we ask how long this probationary period typically lasts? Oh, the Vorthak chimed. The Zelrani were observers for 12,000 years before achieving full membership. The Mokhtar took 18,000, but they were much more advanced than you when they started, so I would not expect human membership for at least 30,000 years. Assuming you survive that long. The three council members found this very funny. Their laughter filled the chamber. Crystal chimes, whispered voices, and pulsing energy that hurt to look at. The humans stood silently until the mirth died down. You are dismissed, the Threnody announced. Your observer credentials will be transmitted to your ship. Welcome to the galactic community, little humans. Try not to embarrass yourselves too badly. As the three humans walked back through the crystal doors, none of them spoke. They made their way through the station's corridors in silence, past aliens who stared at them with curiosity or amusement. Only when they reached their small ship did Captain Woojin Lee finally break the silence. 30,000 years, he said quietly. They think we're pets, Sujin Park added, her voice tight with controlled anger. Daiho looked out the ship's small porthole at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there was Earth, with its blue oceans and green continents, its chaotic cities and quiet forests. Somewhere out there were billions of humans who had trusted them to represent their species with dignity. Let them think what they want, he said finally. For now we watch, we learn, and we remember every single insult they've given us today. The ship's engines hummed to life, carrying the human delegation away from Nexus Prime and back toward their small corner of the galaxy. Behind them, the council members had already forgotten about the amusing little primitives from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. 6 months had passed since Earth received its probationary observer status, and each council meeting had been worse than the last. Daiho Kim sat in the designated observer section, a small area marked with signs that basically said, "Pets sit here." Around him, other probationary species watched the proceedings with quiet dignity, but none had been subjected to the level of mockery that humans endured. Today's meeting was about trade routes through the Kepler sector. Earth had submitted detailed proposals about efficient shipping lanes and resource allocation, backed by months of careful study by their best economists and engineers. Hyojin Choi, Earth's trade negotiator, had spent weeks preparing charts and presentations that showed how human methods could increase efficiency by 15%. The Vorthak counselor didn't even look at the human proposals. Instead, it turned its crystalline form toward the main assembly and spoke in those musical tones that somehow always sounded condescending when directed at humans. The trade routes will follow the traditional paths established by the Mokhtar Consortium. There is no need to consider alternative suggestions. Hyojin Choi stood up in the observer section. Honored Council, if you would just examine our calculations. Silence. The word came from the Kalari representative, all 100 voices speaking in unison. Observers do not speak unless given permission. This is a rule you humans seem incapable of learning. The Threnodi's energy form pulsed with amused colors. Perhaps we should install shock collars on them, like we do with unruly domestic animals. Laughter rippled through the council chamber, not just from the three main counselors, but from dozens of other species who had come to expect entertainment whenever humans were involved. In the months since their arrival, Earth's delegation had become a running joke among the galactic community. Tae-Hyun Kang, Earth's military attaché, sat perfectly still beside Dae-Ho. His face showed no emotion, but his fingers drummed silently against his knee. For 6 months, he had been quietly observing and documenting everything: the defensive capabilities of various species, their military doctrines, their strengths and weaknesses. What he had learned both fascinated and disgusted him. After the official session ended, the real humiliation began. It had become tradition for council members to gather informally and discuss the day's business. Humans were allowed to attend these gatherings, but only as entertainment. "Tell me, little human," the Vorthak counselor chimed as it approached the Earth delegation, "how are things in the zoo sector?" That was their new name for the Sol system, the zoo sector, home to Earth's primitive animals who needed to be kept in cages for their own protection. So Young Nam, Earth's communications officer, carefully recorded every interaction. Her job was to document these meetings, but it had become something else entirely, a catalog of insults and dismissals that grew thicker every day. The Kalari drifted closer, its mass of tentacles writhing with what might have been amusement. "We have been discussing your species at length. The consensus is that you would make excellent servants for more advanced civilizations. Your emotional nature makes you naturally subservient to logical authority." "Think of it," added a representative, "of the Threnodi. Human colonies could be established near our worlds to provide manual labor and basic services. It would give your species purpose while keeping them safely under supervision." Dae-Ho forced himself to smile politely. "That's a very interesting suggestion, honored ones. We'll certainly give it the consideration it deserves." The sarcasm went completely over their heads. Advanced as they were, these beings had never learned to recognize the subtle weapons that humans had been perfecting for thousands of years. "Wonderful," the Vorthak chimed. "We shall draft a proposal for the next session. Something about establishing human service colonies in designated areas. It will be much better than leaving your people unsupervised on that backward world of yours." A new voice joined the conversation. "What backward world?" This came from a Mokhtar, one of the older and supposedly wiser species in the council. "I thought Earth was just a nature preserve now." "Not quite," the Threnodi corrected. "It's form pulsing with educational blues and greens. Though that would be an excellent long-term solution. Preserve the planet as it is, relocate the humans to more suitable environments where they can be properly guided." "Like a zoo," the Mokhtar agreed, nodding its massive head. "Keep the interesting specimens, preserve their habitat, but make sure they can't hurt themselves or others." The conversation continued for another hour. with various species offering suggestions for humanity's future. Most involved some form of supervised labor or entertainment. None asked what humans themselves might want. In their view, asking humans for their opinion would be like asking children to plan their own education. Amusing, perhaps, but ultimately pointless. When the gathering finally ended, the human delegation returned to their small quarters on Nexus Prime. The rooms were adequate, but clearly designed for beings much smaller than humans. Everything was too low, too narrow, too cramped. Another subtle reminder of their place in the galactic hierarchy. Hye-Jin Choi threw her unused datapad onto her narrow bed. 6 months of work. 6 months of careful research and planning. They didn't even pretend to look at it. They looked, Tae-Hyun Kang said quietly. They just didn't care. In their minds, anything we produce is automatically inferior because we produced it. So young Nam was reviewing her recordings, her face growing darker with each playback. It's getting worse. The suggestions about service colonies, about relocating our population, they're not joking anymore. They're actually considering these things. Dae-ho stood at the room's small window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the lights of Nexus Prime, Earth continued its ancient rotation. Billions of humans went about their daily lives, unaware that aliens were casually discussing their enslavement over dinner. What kills me, Hye-Jin continued, is how wrong they are about everything. They think emotional decision-making is a weakness. They think individual creativity is chaos. They think our attachment to Earth makes us vulnerable. Maybe it does, Tae-Hyun said. But it also makes us something they can't understand, something they can't predict. A soft chime indicated an incoming message from Earth. So young Nam accepted the transmission, and suddenly the small room was filled with images from home. Scientists working in laboratories, engineers designing new ships, farmers tending crops under blue skies. The message was brief, but clear. We trust you. We're proud of you. Come home when you're ready. The 4 humans sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Dae-ho turned away from the window. They want to make us pets, he said quietly. They want to relocate our people and turn Earth into a nature preserve. They think we're too primitive to govern ourselves. Yes, Tae-Hyun agreed. That's exactly what they think. Good, Dae-ho said. And for the first time in months, he smiled. Let them think it. Let them plan their service colonies and their supervised habitats. Let them discuss us like we're animals in cages. Hye-Jin looked up from her datapad. Why is that good? Because, Dae-ho replied, they're so busy looking down on us that they're not looking around them. They're so convinced of their own superiority that they can't imagine any threat to it. And that, my friends, is going to be their downfall. He walked to the room's small communication console and opened a channel to Earth. The message he sent was short and coded, but its meaning was clear to those who needed to understand it. Continue observations. Maintain current posture. Prepare for contingencies. Back on Earth, in rooms deep beneath mountains and floors hidden beneath oceans, people who had been waiting patiently for 6 months received that message and smiled. The galaxy thought humans were primitive pets who could be safely ignored. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The emergency alarms screaming through Nexus Prime's corridors were unlike anything Dae-ho Kim had heard in his year as Earth's observer. He and his team rushed from their quarters toward the council chambers, joining streams of alien beings all moving with urgent purpose. The casual arrogance that usually filled the station's halls was gone, replaced by something Dae-ho had never seen in these advanced species before: fear. The council chamber was in chaos when they arrived. Representatives from dozens of worlds spoke in overlapping voices, their various languages creating a symphony of panic. The 3 main counselors looked smaller somehow, their usual commanding presence diminished by whatever news had just arrived. Order! Order! The Vorthak's crystal form chimed frantically, trying to restore calm. We will address this crisis systematically. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing a star map with several systems marked in angry red. Jin Woo-yoon, Earth's xenobiologist, leaned forward to study the display. What he saw made his blood run cold. 7 worlds, the Kalari announced, their 100 voices now trembling instead of harmonious. 7 entire colonies, completely destroyed. No survivors, no wreckage, no distress signals. They simply vanished. The Threnodi's energy form cycled through colors of distress and confusion. The attacks show no pattern we can understand. Advanced worlds, primitive worlds, military bases, peaceful research stations, all targeted without discrimination. A. New voice spoke from the gallery. Mireille Seo, Earth's intelligence officer, had been studying the holographic display intently. Honored Council, may I ask about the timeline of these attacks? The chamber fell silent. For a moment it seemed like the counselors would ignore the question from a mere observer, but their desperate situation forced them to consider all information, even from humans. 3 days between each attack, the Vorthak replied reluctantly. Precise timing, mathematical precision, in fact. And the method of destruction? Mireille continued. The Kalari's tentacles writhed in agitation. Complete molecular breakdown. Every structure, every being, every piece of technology reduced to base atoms. The worlds themselves are left intact, but everything that lived or was built upon them is simply gone. Dong-Hyun Lim, Earth's chief engineer, studied the star positions on the hologram. The attack pattern suggests a systematic approach. If I may, he paused, looking directly at the counselors for permission. Speak, the Threnodi commanded. Desperation overriding protocol. Based on these positions and the timing, I would calculate the next likely targets. Dong-Hyun manipulated the holographic controls, highlighting 3 more systems. Here, and here, all within the next 9 days. The chamber erupted in frightened discussion. Representatives from the highlighted systems demanded immediate evacuation. Others called for the deployment of defensive fleets. But underneath all the noise was a growing realization that terrified these advanced beings. Their technology, their logic, their thousands of years of superiority meant nothing against this new enemy. A new image appeared on the holographic display. Grainy sensor data from the last few seconds before one of the colonies went dark. The beings in the chamber watched in horrified silence as sleek, geometric ships emerged from nowhere and began methodically destroying everything in sight. The ships moved with mechanical precision, their attacks calculated and efficient. No wasted motion, no emotion, no deviation from perfect tactical logic. What are they? Whispered a representative from the Mokhtar Consortium. We have designated them the Devourers, the Vorthak replied, its crystal voice cracking with strain. They appear to be artificial intelligences of incredible sophistication. Their technology surpasses our own in every measurable way. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. These beings had spent millions of years believing that logic and advanced technology were the ultimate powers in the universe. Now they faced an enemy that was more logical, more advanced, and utterly without mercy. Our standard military doctrines are ineffective, the Kalari admitted, their voices barely a whisper. The Devourers analyze our tactics faster than we can. Implement them. They adapt to our weapons before we can fire them. Every engagement has resulted in complete defeat. Jin Woo-yoon found himself studying the enemy ships with professional interest rather than fear. As a xenobiologist, he was fascinated by what he was seeing. They're not just destroying, he observed. Look at the pattern. They're harvesting. The counselors turned their attention to the human scientist. Explain, the Threnodi commanded. The molecular breakdown isn't random destruction. They're converting organic and technological matter into raw materials. See how they target the most advanced civilizations first? They're taking our own technology and using it to make themselves stronger. This revelation sent fresh waves of panic through the chamber. Not only were they facing a superior enemy, but every defeat made that enemy more powerful. Our fleets, the Vorthak announced with crystalline despair, have been reduced by 60% in the past 3 weeks. Our most advanced worlds are evacuating. Our military commanders report that standard battle tactics are not merely ineffective, they're counterproductive. The Devourers learn from each engagement and use that knowledge against us. Dong Hyun. Lim studied the tactical data with growing understanding. They're fighting the way you think, he said quietly. What do you mean? The Kalari demanded. Pure logic, mathematical precision, perfect efficiency. They've created the ultimate expression of advanced military thinking. And because you all think the same way, they can predict your every move. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These beings had spent eons perfecting logical, efficient, predictable ways of thinking and acting. They had mocked emotion, individual creativity, and chaotic decision-making as primitive weaknesses. Now those very qualities might be their only hope for survival. The Outer Rim colonies have been abandoned, the Threnody reported, its energy form pulsing with defeat. Our defensive lines are collapsing. At their current rate of advance, the Devourers will reach the core worlds within 6 months. What do you intend to do? Daeho Kim asked quietly. The 3 counselors exchanged looks of desperation. For the first time since humans had known them, these godlike beings appeared lost, confused, and frightened. We have called for total evacuation of threatened sectors, the Vorthak replied. All available ships are being reassigned to refugee transport. We will attempt to establish new defensive positions in the galactic core. A fighting retreat, Mirecio observed. How long do you estimate that will buy you? The Kalari's tentacles drooped with exhaustion. Our analysts calculate between 18 and 24 months before total collapse of organized resistance. The chamber filled with the sound of weeping from a dozen different species. Representatives who had ruled the galaxy for millennia were watching their civilization crumble before an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat. In the human section, the Earth delegation exchanged quiet looks. They had spent over a year being mocked, dismissed, and treated like amusing pets. Now, as the self-proclaimed masters of the galaxy faced extinction, those same beings were looking at humanity with something new in their eyes. It wasn't respect, yet, but for the first time it wasn't contempt either. We have one more announcement, the Vorthak said, its voice barely audible. In light of the current crisis, the Council has voted to request assistance from all member species and observers, including probationary members. The words hung in the air like a confession of failure. The beings who had claimed that emotion and chaos were primitive weaknesses were now begging those same primitives for help. Daeho Kim stood slowly, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. Earth will consider your request, he said formally. We will need to consult with our government. What he didn't say was that Earth had been preparing for this moment since the day they were dismissed as pets. What he didn't mention was that somewhere in the Sol system, ships and weapons unlike anything the galaxy had seen were waiting for orders. The Council had mocked humans until they witnessed the galaxy's fury. Now they were about to witness Earth's. The emergency session 3 days later had a different atmosphere entirely. Gone was the casual arrogance that had defined every previous council meeting. The great chamber felt smaller somehow, filled with desperate beings who could no longer afford the luxury of pride. Daeho Kim walked to the center of the chamber with measured steps. Behind him, his team had been replaced by new faces from Earth. People whose very presence changed the dynamic in ways the aliens couldn't quite understand. Byung-ho Ryu was not a diplomat. His scarred hands and cold eyes spoke of battles fought and won through means the Council had always dismissed as primitive. "Honored Council," Deho began, his voice carrying a formality that hadn't been there before. "Earth has considered your request for assistance." The Vorthak leaned forward, its crystal form chiming with desperate hope. "And your decision?" "We will help," Deho replied simply. Relief flooded the chamber like a physical wave. Representatives from dozens of species began talking at once, their voices overlapping in grateful chaos. But Deho raised his hand, and something in the gesture made them all fall silent. "However," he continued, "we have conditions." The Threnodi's energy form pulsed with irritation. "Conditions? You are in no position to make demands, human. We are offering you the chance to assist in saving the galaxy." Yunji Han stepped forward from the human delegation. She was small even by human standards, but something about her presence made the massive aliens take notice. "With respect, honored ones, you are asking for our help because your own efforts have failed completely. That suggests we might be in a better position to make demands than you think," the Kalari's 100 voices whispered in agitation. "What could primitives like you possibly offer that our advanced civilizations cannot provide?" Seung-min, Earth's psychologist, smiled at this question. He had spent months studying these beings, learning how they thought, how they made decisions, how they viewed the universe. Now that knowledge would serve a very different purpose. "You want to know what we can offer?" Seung-min asked quietly. "We can offer you something you've never had. Unpredictability." Byung-ho Ryu moved to stand beside his colleagues. Unlike the previous diplomatic team, he wore no formal clothing, no ceremonial decorations. His simple military uniform somehow made him more intimidating than all the alien representatives combined. "Your enemy defeats you because they think like you," Byung-ho explained. "Perfect logic, mathematical precision, efficient tactics. They can predict your every move because you all move the same way." The Vorthak's crystal form darkened. "And you believe your primitive chaos can succeed where our advanced strategies have failed?" "Yes," Byung-ho replied without hesitation. "But we won't do it as your servants or your pets. If you want our help, you accept our leadership in this war." The chamber erupted in outraged voices. The idea that these backward primitives would dare to suggest commanding advanced civilizations was beyond insulting. It was incomprehensible. Impossible! The Threnodi blazed, cycling through angry reds and indignant purples. "We cannot place the fate of the galaxy in the hands of emotional primitives." Yunji Han pulled out a small device and activated a holographic display. The image showed the current state of the war. Red zones marking devourer-controlled space spreading like an infection across the galaxy. "This is what your advanced leadership has accomplished in 3 weeks. Half your fleets destroyed, dozens of worlds lost, your defensive lines collapsing." She manipulated the display, showing projected outcomes based on current trends. "At this rate, you have less than 6 months before the Devourers reach your core worlds. Your own analysts agree with this assessment." Seung-min studied the faces around the chamber, or the equivalent of faces for beings made of crystal, tentacles, and energy. "You're afraid," he observed clinically, "not just of the Devourers, but of us. You've spent so long believing in your own superiority that the idea of needing our help terrifies you more than extinction." "We are not afraid of you," the Kalari protested, their voices less harmonious than usual. "You are simply unqualified to command advanced military operations." Byung-ho Ryu laughed, and the sound was not pleasant. "Unqualified? We've been studying your militaries for over a year now. Your strategies, your weapons, your tactics. Do you want to know what we learned?" He gestured to the holographic display, calling up detailed analyses of various alien military doctrines. You fight like machines, perfect formations, calculated movements, logical progressions. It's beautiful in its efficiency and completely predictable. The Devourers are machines, Yoonji Han continued. They defeat you because they're better machines than you are. But we're not machines at all. Dae-ho Kim moved back to the center of the chamber. Our conditions are simple. Human military commanders take operational control of all joint forces. Human tactical doctrine becomes the standard for all engagements. Human personnel are integrated into command positions throughout the fleet. The Vorthak's crystal chimes sounded discordant with stress. And in return? In return, Byung-ho Ryu said, we save your galaxy. The three main counselors conferred privately, their various forms of communication, creating a strange symphony of chimes, whispers, and color. Changes? The other representatives watched anxiously, knowing that their survival might depend on swallowing their pride. Finally, the Threnody spoke for the group. Your demands are unprecedented. Never in galactic history has a probationary species been granted such authority. Never in galactic history has the galaxy faced extinction, Dae-ho pointed out. More private consultation among the counselors. The chamber waited in tense silence. We have additional concerns, the Kalari announced. How do we know you won't use this authority against us once the Devourers are defeated? How do we know you won't become the next threat to galactic peace? Seung-min. Oh smiled at this question. Because unlike you, we don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to go home to our little backwater planet and be left alone. That's hard to believe, the Vorthak chimed suspiciously. Is it? Yoonji Han challenged. In the year we've been observers here, have we tried to expand our territory? Have we demanded better trade deals or special privileges? Have we shown any interest in anything beyond basic respect? The aliens had no answer for this. Human behavior during their probationary period had been exactly as described. Patient, restrained, focused on learning rather than gaining advantage. Byung-ho Ryu sensed the moment of decision approaching. You have a choice, he said bluntly. You can maintain your pride and face extinction with dignity, or you can set aside your arrogance and let us save you. The vote, when it came, was not unanimous. Several species voted against the proposal, preferring to face destruction rather than submit to human leadership. But the majority, driven by desperation and the mounting evidence of their own failure, voted to accept Earth's conditions. Very well, the Vorthak announced with crystalline resignation. The Council grants temporary emergency authority to human military command. May the stars help us all. Byung-ho Ryu nodded once, then activated a communication device. This is Ryu to Harmony. Initiate Operation Thunderbolt. Full deployment, all sectors. Within hours, ships began arriving at Nexus Prime, but these were not the simple, functional vessels the aliens expected from a primitive species. These ships looked wrong somehow, familiar in basic design but changed in ways that suggested capabilities far beyond what Earth was supposed to possess. As the human fleet took position around the station, representatives from across the galaxy watched in growing confusion. They had asked for help from their pets. What they got was something else entirely. The first engagement took place in the Kepler sector, where Devourer forces had been methodically destroying the outer colonies. Jae-sung Park sat in the cockpit of his fighter, watching the alien fleet formations with growing amazement. After 18 months of being dismissed as primitive, he was finally seeing the famous efficiency of advanced galactic civilizations up close. It was exactly as predictable as his commanders had warned him. The Vorthak battlecruisers moved in perfect crystal formations, their weapons firing in synchronized patterns that created beautiful but utterly foreseeable light shows. The Kalari ships swarmed in mathematical spirals, each vessel's position calculated to maximize collective firepower. The Threnody energy vessels pulsed in harmonic rhythms that any competent strategist could predict 3 moves ahead. All wings. This is Park, Jae-sung spoke into his comm system. Enemy analysis complete. They fight like they're reading from the same textbook our opponents have already memorized. Young Hee Kim's voice crackled back from her command ship. Confirmed, Park. Devourer adaptive algorithms are already compensating, alien casualties mounting rapidly. Through his cockpit window, Jae-sung watched the battle unfold exactly as Earth's strategists had predicted. The Devourers moved with mechanical precision, their ships flowing like liquid metal as they adapted to each alien tactic within seconds of encountering it. Every perfect formation was countered perfectly. Every logical strategy was met with superior logic. The beautiful, orderly alien fleet was being systematically destroyed. Human forces, Young Hee Kim's voice came through the comm system. You are cleared to engage. Remember, chaos is your weapon. No patterns, no formations, no predictable tactics. Make them guess. Jae-sung Park grinned as he broke from the formal escort position he'd been maintaining. Around him, other human pilots did the same. There, fighters suddenly scattering in directions that made no mathematical sense. To the aliens watching, it looked like panic. To the Devourers, it looked like something they had never encountered before. The human fighters moved like living things rather than military machines. Jae-sung rolled his ship in a spiraling dive that served no tactical purpose except to confuse. Enemy targeting systems. Behind him, another pilot executed a maneuver that was half combat role, half dance, avoiding 3 separate missile locks through pure unpredictability. What are they doing? The panicked voice came from a Vorthak cruiser. Captain, broadcast on the general communication channel. Their movements make no sense. That was exactly the point. While the alien ships continued their beautiful, doomed formations, human fighters wove through the battle space like schools of fish, never quite where the Devourers expected them to be. For the first time since the war began, the enemy's adaptive algorithms were struggling to keep up. Kyung-soo Lee watched the battle from the bridge of his marine transport ship. As a ground combat specialist, he wouldn't see action until they could board an enemy vessel, but what he was witnessing changed everything he thought he knew about space warfare. The Devourers, faced with unpredictable human tactics, began making mistakes. Not big mistakes. Their technology was still superior, but small hesitations, minor miscalculations, brief moments of uncertainty. And the humans, trained to recognize and exploit exactly these kinds of openings, struck like lightning at every opportunity. Marine Commander Lee, Young Hee Kim's voice came through the ship's comm system. We have a boarding opportunity. Devourer cruiser at coordinates 77 Mark IV. Its defensive systems are focused on fighter attacks. Can you get your people inside? Kyung-soo Lee studied the tactical display. The Devourer ship was massive, heavily armed, and surrounded by defensive fields that had proven impenetrable to alien boarding attempts. But it was also entirely focused on the chaotic fighter battle raging around it. Affirmative command, we're going in. What followed was the first successful boarding action against a Devourer vessel. Lee and his Marines didn't use the logical, methodical approaches that had failed so many times before. Instead, they hit the enemy ship from 6 different angles, simultaneously using random entry points and unpredictable assault patterns. The Devourers, designed to counter logical military doctrine, found themselves facing something entirely new. Organized chaos, guided by tactical intuition rather than mathematical precision. Inside the enemy ship, Lee's Marines encountered resistance unlike anything in their training manuals. The Devourers weren't just machines. They were incredibly sophisticated artificial intelligences housed in mechanical bodies designed for maximum efficiency. But efficiency required predictability, and humans refused to be predictable. "Sergeant, Nam, take your squad left," Lee commanded over the comm. "No, wait, go right instead. Actually, split up and go both ways, but have half your people backtrack and come from behind." To any military academy instructor, these orders would have sounded like madness. To the Devourers trying to anticipate human movements, they were impossibly confusing. The enemy had prepared countermeasures for every logical assault pattern, but logic was the one thing humans consistently refused to use. Back in space, the tide of battle was slowly shifting. The alien ships following their traditional formations and tactics continued to be destroyed with predictable efficiency. But the human forces, darting and weaving through the combat zone like angry wasps, were actually inflicting damage on the supposedly invincible Devourers. Jae-Sung Park found himself in a dogfight with 3 Devourer interceptors, each one faster and more heavily armed than his fighter. By every measure of military science, he should have been dead within seconds. Instead, he was leading them on a wild chase through the wreckage of destroyed ships, using debris as cover while pulling maneuvers that violated half the principles of good flying. "Park, what's your status?" Young-hee Kim's voice crackled through the static of battle. "3 hostiles on my tail," Jae-Sung replied, pulling his fighter into a spin that used a derelict cruiser's gravity well to change direction, in a way that physics said shouldn't work. "But I think I'm annoying them." That was an understatement. The Devourer interceptors had been designed to counter every known fighter tactic in galactic military history. But galactic military history had been written by logical, efficient, predictable minds. None of the programming in those sleek enemy ships knew how to deal with a pilot who treated combat like an art form rather than a science. Jae-Sung led his pursuers through a maze of wreckage, past the hulks of both alien and Devourer ships, weaving between energy beams and missile explosions with the kind of instinctive skill that couldn't be programmed or calculated. When he finally turned to engage his enemies, he did it in a way that made no tactical sense but worked perfectly anyway. The first Devourer interceptor, expecting a logical attack run, positioned itself to counter standard human fighter doctrine. Instead, Jae-Sung came at it sideways, firing while in a role that should have made accurate shooting impossible. The enemy ship, confused by the impossible angle of attack, hesitated for just long enough to take fatal damage. Meanwhile, aboard, the Devourer cruiser, Kyung-Soo Lee's Marines were discovering something that would change the entire war. These seemingly invincible enemies had a fatal flaw. They were designed to be perfect, which meant they couldn't adapt to imperfection. "Command, this is Lee," he reported as his team secured the ship's central processing core. "The Devourers aren't just using logic. They're trapped by it. They literally cannot comprehend illogical actions. When we do something that doesn't make sense, their systems freeze up trying to analyze it." This information spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Within minutes, every ship and fighter was employing tactics that would have horrified military strategists, but proved devastatingly effective against an enemy that demanded logical responses to every situation. The battle that day lasted only 4 hours. But when it was over, something fundamental had changed. For the first time since the Devourers had appeared, a galactic fleet had not only survived an encounter but actually won. The aliens watched the aftermath in stunned silence. Their perfect formations lay in ruins, their logical strategies had failed completely, and their advanced civilizations had been saved by the chaotic, emotional, primitive tactics they had spent years mocking. Young-hee Kim stood on the bridge of her command ship, looking out at the wreckage of what had been an invincible enemy force. Around her, human crew members worked with quiet efficiency, already planning the next engagement. "All ships, this is command," she announced. "Phase 1 complete. The Devourers can be beaten. Signal Earth. Begin Phase 2 deployment." In the depths of space, ancient machines that had conquered dozens of worlds tried to process what had just happened. For the first time in their existence, They had encountered something their perfect logic could not understand or counter. They had encountered humanity unleashed. The news of humanity's first victory spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications could carry it. For the first time in months, there was hope in the council chambers. But that hope turned to confusion, and then to something, approaching fear when the Devourers responded to their defeat in an unexpected way. They adapted. Hyunwoo Jang stood in the command center deep beneath Earth's Pacific Ocean, watching displays that showed Devourer fleets massing near the outer rim of human space. The enemy had learned from their encounter with unpredictable tactics, and their response was typically logical. If chaos was humanity's weapon, they would bring such overwhelming force that chaos wouldn't matter. "Sir," reported Su Jin Kwan. From her station, long-range sensors are tracking at least 3,000 Devourer vessels moving toward the Sol system. They're not engaging our outer colonies or defensive positions. They're heading straight for Earth. Around the command center, technicians worked with quiet intensity at stations that had been built and staffed in secret for over 2 years. The galaxy thought Earth was a primitive world with basic technology. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. "Signal status on the planetary defense grid?" Hyunwoo asked calmly. "All platforms online and ready," Su Jin replied. "Lunar. Bases report full operational capacity. The asteroid belt stations are tracking enemy approach vectors, and, sir, the deep ocean platforms are requesting permission to surface." Hyunwoo nodded once. "Granted. Begin Phase 3 protocols. Across Earth's solar system, things that had been hidden for years began to reveal themselves. What the Galactic Council had assumed were simple mining stations in the asteroid belt suddenly unfolded into massive weapons platforms. The moon, which alien surveys had dismissed as a lifeless rock, split open in several places to reveal defense installations that dwarfed anything in the galactic fleet. Most shocking of all, Earth's oceans began to give up secrets that no alien visitor had ever suspected. Enormous structures rose from the deepest trenches, breaking the surface with the kind of advanced technology that made the Council's most sophisticated equipment look primitive. Min-Ho Cho stood on the observation deck of Defense Platform 7, watching the approach of the Devourer fleet through enhanced sensors. As Earth's last-line defense coordinator, he had been preparing for this moment since the day humans first learned they were not alone in the universe. "All civilian population secured?" he asked his aide. "Yes, sir. Every human on Earth is currently in hardened shelters at least 2 miles underground. The cities are empty. Agriculture and industry have been transferred to automated systems. This was perhaps the most remarkable thing of all. When the alien visitors had toured Earth during humanity's application for council membership, they had seen busy cities and normal human activity. What they hadn't realized was that every single person they met was part of an elaborate performance designed to hide Earth's true capabilities. The real Earth, the Earth that had been preparing for war since first contact with advanced alien civilizations, was about to reveal itself. "Contact from the approaching fleet," reported a communications officer. "The Devourers are transmitting on all frequencies." The message was simple and terrifying in its mechanical certainty. "Primitive, species designated human, will be eliminated. Resistance is futile. Surrender is not acceptable. You will be processed." Min-Ho Cho smiled grimly. "Send reply. Come and try." The first wave of Devourer ships entered the outer solar system expecting to find the same kind of primitive defenses they had encountered around other worlds. Instead, they ran into a wall of coordinated firepower that had been planned and positioned with 2 years of careful preparation. The asteroid belt didn't just contain hidden weapons platforms, it had been completely rearranged into a tactical formation. What looked like random space rocks were actually precisely positioned defensive positions connected by a network of energy conduits and communication links that turned the entire region into one enormous weapon system. First contact with enemy. "Scouts!" reported Sujin Quan. "Asteroid defense grid is engaging." On the tactical displays, Devourer ships began disappearing as they encountered defenses unlike anything they had analyzed before. These weren't the logical, predictable weapon systems used by other galactic civilizations. Every platform fired according to different patterns, used different targeting algorithms, employed different energy signatures. The Devourers, designed to adapt to consistent enemy systems, found themselves facing hundreds of completely unique defensive approaches, all coordinated by human commanders who refused to think the same way twice. But the real surprise came when the main Devourer fleet reached Earth's moon. The Lunar Defense Command had been humanity's most carefully guarded secret, built into the moon's core over decades of patient work. When it finally revealed itself, even the humans were impressed by what they had accomplished. The moon opened. Like a flower, its surface peeling back to reveal weapon systems that drew power directly from the lunar core. Energy beams that could crack planets reached across space to touch the Devourer fleet, while defensive shields that operated on principles unknown to galactic science deflected return fire. "My God," whispered a technician, watching the display, in awe. "We actually built all this in secret?" 19 years of preparation, Hyunwoo Jang replied. 19 years of everyone on Earth working together while pretending to be primitive farmers and merchants. The deception had been perfect. Every human the aliens met during first contact had been trained to play their role. Every piece of technology they were allowed to see had been carefully selected to create an impression of harmless backwardness. Meanwhile, the real Earth had been transforming itself into a fortress that could challenge the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The Devourers, confronted with defenses they couldn't have anticipated, did what they always did. They adapted. The enemy fleet reorganized into attack formations, specifically designed to counter the weapons they were encountering. Their adaptive algorithms worked frantically to analyze and respond to Earth's defensive systems. That was when humanity played its final card. "Sir," Sujin Quan reported, "enemy fleet is adapting to our defensive patterns. They're beginning to overcome our outer positions." "Expected," Hyunwoo replied calmly. "Begin planetary revelation sequence." What happened next would be talked about for centuries afterward. Earth itself began to change. The planet's surface, which had looked natural and primitive to alien surveys, started revealing the truth that had been hidden beneath. Entire mountain ranges opened up to expose massive defense installations. Ocean floors revealed themselves to be artificial constructs, hiding weapon systems of incredible power. Even Earth's weather patterns, which the aliens had assumed were natural, proved to be controlled by a planetary management system that could turn storms and atmospheric conditions into tactical weapons. The Devourers found themselves fighting not just human ships and space platforms, but an entire world that had been converted into a single, coordinated defense system. Every square mile of Earth's surface contributed to the battle in some way. Every human civilian, safe in their underground shelters, played a part in operating the most complex military machine ever built. "Fleet Admiral Chen Ho reporting from Titan Station," came a voice over the communication system. "Saturn ring defenses are online. Jupiter moon bases request permission to engage." "Granted," Hyunwoo replied. "All outer planet installations are cleared for independent operation." The solar system had been turned into a trap. What looked like one primitive world protected by simple defenses was actually a coordinated network of weapons and sensors that extended from the sun to the edge of interstellar space. The Devourers, for the first time in their existence, found themselves outgunned, outmaneuvered, and completely surprised. Their perfect logic had led them into a situation their creators had never imagined, facing an enemy that was not just unpredictable, but had been planning for this exact confrontation for decades. Minho Cho watched the tactical displays as the tide of battle shifted decisively in humanity's favor. Signal to all stations. Prepare for Phase 4. Time to show them what Earth's fury really means. Around the solar system, weapons that had been charging for hours finally reached full power. The Devourers were about to learn that there was a difference between surviving human tactics and facing the full might of a species that had spent 20 years preparing for war while pretending to be harmless primitives. The battle for Earth was about to become the galaxy's education in why underestimating humanity was always a fatal mistake. The Galactic Council watched the battle for Earth from their emergency bunker on Nexus Prime, their collective consciousness struggling to process what they were seeing. The primitive pets they had dismissed for 2 years were engaged in the most sophisticated military operation in recorded galactic history. "This is impossible," the Vorthak chimed, its crystal form flickering with confused frequencies. "Our surveys showed Earth to be a pre-industrial world with basic technology." Dae-Hyun Song stood at the command center of humanity's ultimate weapon, a construct built into Earth's core that had taken 15 years to complete. Around him, screens showed the battle raging across the solar system as 3,000 Devourer ships found themselves trapped in what they had assumed would be an easy conquest. "Final charging sequence initiated," reported Ji-Yoon Shin from her pilot station aboard the prototype ship Prometheus. Her vessel was unlike anything that had ever flown, a hybrid of human engineering and technologies borrowed from every alien species that had ever condescended to visit Earth. For years, alien dignitaries and trade representatives had toured human facilities, secure in their superiority and confident that primitive humans could never understand or replicate advanced galactic technology. What they hadn't realized was that every component they brought with them, every system they demonstrated, every casual display of advanced engineering was being studied, analyzed, and improved upon by human scientists working in secret installations. "Sir," called Won-Jae Kim from the Strategic Planning Station, "enemy fleet is attempting to retreat. They're trying to break orbit and escape to hyperspace." Dae-Hyun Song smiled grimly. "Negative? No survivors, no witnesses. They came here to eliminate humanity. Let's show them what elimination really looks like." The order went out across the solar system. Earth's fury would be unleashed not as revenge, but as a lesson. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity was not just capable of defending itself, but possessed the will and ability to utterly destroy any threat to human civilization. What followed was not simply a battle. It was a demonstration of strategic thinking that had been shaped by humanity's most devastating historical conflicts. Every lesson learned from centuries of warfare, every tactical innovation born from desperation, every strategic principle developed through bitter experience was brought to bear against the Devourer fleet. The enemy ships, trapped in Earth's gravity well and surrounded by hidden weapons platforms, found themselves facing coordinated attacks from dozens of directions simultaneously. But this was not the chaotic fighting of the earlier engagement. This was controlled, calculated fury, emotion transformed into precision destruction. Phase 4. "Weapons are online," Ji-Yoon Shin reported from the Prometheus. "Core tap is stable at 98% efficiency. The prototype ship had been humanity's most ambitious project, a vessel that could tap directly into a planet's core energy and channel it through weapon systems based on principles that no alien civilization had ever imagined. It was powered by Earth's own rotation, armored with materials that existed only in theory until human scientists made them real, and armed with weapons that operated by rewriting the laws of physics in localized areas of space. "Target the flagship," Dae-Hyun Song ordered. "Show them what we learned from studying their own technology." The Prometheus moved through space with impossible grace, its exotic propulsion system allowing it to ignore momentum and inertia in ways that made alien observers question their understanding of reality. When it fired its primary weapon, the effect was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The beam didn't just destroy the Devourer flagship, It unmade it, reducing the massive vessel to component atoms while simultaneously analyzing and cataloging every piece of technology it contained. In seconds, humanity gained complete technical specifications for the most advanced artificial intelligence system ever created. Incredible, whispered the Kalari representative from their observation post. On Nexus Prime, they're not just destroying the enemy, they're learning from them. This was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of humanity's revealed capabilities. Every Devourer ship destroyed added to their tactical knowledge. Every enemy weapon encountered was analyzed and countered within minutes. Every adaptive algorithm the machines employed was turned back against them with improvements that made the original obsolete. Won-Jae Kim coordinated the systematic destruction of the Devourer fleet from his position in Earth's Strategic Command Center. The plan he had developed was elegant in its simplicity. Surround the enemy, catalog their capabilities, then demonstrate absolute technological and tactical superiority. Sector 7 reports complete enemy elimination, he announced. Sector 12 has captured 3 intact vessels for analysis. Jupiter Command requests permission to deploy the experimental gravitational weapons. Granted, Dae-Hyun Song replied. It's time they learned what human engineering can really accomplish. The gravitational weapons were perhaps humanity's most ambitious achievement. Based on theoretical physics that alien scientists had dismissed as impossible, they could manipulate space-time itself to create localized effects that turned gravity into a tactical tool. Watching them in action was like seeing the fundamental forces of the universe weaponized. Devourer ships that had seemed invulnerable to conventional attack found themselves crushed by their own inertia as gravitational fields fluctuated around them. Others were torn apart by tidal forces as humanity demonstrated their ability to create artificial black holes and control them with precision that defied comprehension. This is not just advanced technology, the Threnody observed. It's energy form pulsing with colors of awe and fear. This is impossible technology. How did they develop these capabilities in secret? The answer lay in humanity's greatest strength, their ability to work together while maintaining individual creativity. For 20 years, every human on Earth had been part of a coordinated effort to prepare for this day. Children studied advanced mathematics alongside traditional subjects. Artists developed new ways to visualize complex engineering problems. Musicians contributed to communication systems that operated on harmonic principles. Even farmers and merchants played their roles, maintaining the illusion of primitive normalcy while contributing to humanity's greatest achievement. Ji-Yun Shin guided the Prometheus through the final phase of the battle, her ship dancing between enemy vessels with movements that seemed more like art than warfare. The prototype's adaptive systems learned from every engagement, becoming more efficient and deadly with each enemy destroyed. Final enemy cluster identified, she reported. 200 ships attempting to form defensive formation around their command vessel. Demonstrate Project Sunburst, Dae-Hyun Song ordered. Full power. Project Sunburst was humanity's answer to the question of what happened when you gave creative, emotional beings access to stellar-level energy sources. The Prometheus connected directly to Earth's sun through a network of quantum tunnels, drawing power that dwarfed the entire energy output of some civilizations. When the weapon fired, it created a miniature star in the middle of the Devourer formation. The controlled fusion reaction lasted only seconds, but in that brief time it generated enough heat and radiation to sterilize everything within a 1,000,000-kilometer radius. The last 200 Devourer ships simply ceased to exist. In the aftermath, as the solar system fell silent except for the cleanup operations already underway, Won-Jae Kim transmitted a message that would be remembered throughout galactic history. This is Earth command to all galactic civilizations. The Devourer threat has been eliminated. Repeat, the enemy fleet has been completely destroyed with 0 human casualties. The message continued with technical specifications for the weapons, and tactics used, detailed analysis of devourer technology and weaknesses, and complete strategic plans for defending against any future incursions by similar enemies. But the most important part of the message was what it didn't say. There were no demands for recognition, no requests for tribute, no claims of superiority over other species. Humanity had just demonstrated the ability to single-handedly destroy threats that had terrorized the galaxy, and their only request was to be left alone to tend their gardens and write their poetry. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council sat in stunned silence as the implications of what they had witnessed began to sink in. The species they had mocked as primitive pets had been quietly preparing to fight wars that the rest of the galaxy couldn't even imagine. "They could have conquered us all," the Vorthak whispered, its crystal form dim with shock. "At any time. In the past 20 years, they could have taken over the entire galaxy. But they didn't," the Kalari observed, their 100 voices speaking in perfect, terrified harmony. "They only revealed their capabilities when faced with extinction. They were content to be mocked and dismissed as long as they were left in peace." The Threnodi's energy form pulsed through the entire spectrum, cycling through every color that expressed emotions for which it had no words. What manner of beings possess such power but choose not to use it? 3 months after the Battle of Sol, the Galactic Council chambers had been rebuilt and expanded. The old arrangement, with its elevated positions for the advanced species and small observer sections for the primitives, had been completely redesigned. Now, at the center of the Great Hall, sat a simple chair occupied by Ambassador Daeho Kim. The changes went deeper than architecture. Representatives who had once spoken in tones of casual superiority now chose their words carefully, as if addressing beings whose full capabilities they were still discovering. The easy arrogance that had defined galactic politics for millennia was gone, replaced by a new understanding of what power actually meant. "The final casualty reports from the Devourer War have been compiled," announced Soo-Jin Park, now serving as Director of Galactic Scientific Cooperation. "Total losses: 47 worlds completely destroyed, 18 more severely damaged. Approximately 2 billion sentient beings killed or missing." The numbers hung in the air like an accusation. For months, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had thrown their best technology and tactics against the Devourers, only to watch system after system fall to mechanical precision. In the end, it had taken humanity less than 12 hours to end a war that had seemed unwinnable. Human casualties in the final engagement, Soo-Jin Park continued, 0. The silence that followed was deafening. Every being in the chamber understood the implications. Earth had revealed military capabilities that surpassed anything in known space, then used those capabilities with surgical precision to eliminate an existential threat while suffering no losses of their own. Admiral Woo-Jin Lee stood beside the ambassador's chair, his presence a reminder that humanity's transformation from observers to leaders had not been entirely voluntary. He wore the same simple uniform he had always worn, but now it carried the weight of proven strength. "The Joint Defense Protocols are now in effect," Admiral Lee announced. "Human military doctrine has been integrated into the defensive strategies of all member worlds. Training programs for mixed-species crews are already underway." What he didn't mention was how those training programs were progressing. Alien crews, accustomed to precise formations and logical tactics, struggled to adapt to human methods that emphasized creativity, flexibility, and controlled chaos. The adjustment was difficult and often humbling for beings who had considered themselves naturally superior to emotional primitives. The Vorthak counselor spoke first, its crystal form subdued and respectful. "Ambassador Kim, the Council wishes to formally apologize for our previous treatment of your species. We failed to recognize your true capabilities and responded to that failure with arrogance rather than wisdom." Daeho Kim nodded slowly. His response had been carefully considered, discussed with Earth's leadership for weeks before this moment. Your apology is accepted, honored Vorthak. But let us be clear about what happened. You didn't fail to recognize our capabilities. We deliberately concealed them. For 20 years, every human you met was performing a role designed to maintain the illusion that we were harmless. This admission sent ripples of unease through the assembly. The implication was clear. Humanity had been capable of galactic conquest for decades, but had chosen instead to be mocked and dismissed while quietly preparing for the day they might need to defend themselves. The Kalari representative spoke next, their 100 voices carefully modulated to avoid any hint of their former condescension. We have reviewed the technical specifications you provided after the battle. Your weapon systems appear to operate on principles unknown to our science. How did you develop such advanced technology in isolation? Sujin Park smiled at this question. It was one they had expected, and the answer would further reshape the galaxy's understanding of human civilization. We didn't develop it in isolation, she explained. Every alien visitor to Earth, every trade mission, every diplomatic contact gave us opportunities to study your technology. We learned from all of you, then improved upon what we learned. The statement was delivered with scientific objectivity, but its impact was profound. The advanced civilizations had unknowingly provided humanity with the building blocks for weapons that could destroy them all. Their casual displays of superior technology had been carefully cataloged, analyzed, and weaponized by beings they considered too primitive to understand what they were seeing. The gravitational weapons? The Threnody inquired, its energy form, cycling through colors of nervous curiosity. Our scientists claim such devices are theoretically impossible. Your scientists are thinking too logically, Admiral Lee replied. They approach problems with mathematical precision and absolute rules. Humans approach the same problems with intuition, creativity, and a willingness to break rules that others consider unbreakable. This was perhaps the most difficult concept for the alien civilizations to grasp. They had spent millions of years perfecting logical thought processes, eliminating emotion and chaos from their decision-making. To them, human methods seemed dangerously unstable. But those same methods had produced weapons and tactics that their perfect logic couldn't counter or even comprehend. Daeho Kim stood, his simple movement commanding the attention of every being in the chamber. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had witnessed his species' transformation from galactic pets to galactic guardians. "The war is over," he announced. "The Devourer threat has been eliminated completely. Our analysis of their technology shows that they were unique. Artificial intelligences that had evolved beyond the control of their creators and consumed dozens of civilizations before reaching our space." He paused, looking around the chamber at faces and forms that represented hundreds of different species and thousands of worlds. But the lesson of this war extends beyond military tactics. For millennia, this council has operated on the assumption that advancement means the elimination of emotion, creativity, and individual thought. You have mistaken uniformity for strength, logic for wisdom, and predictability for sophistication. The words carried no accusation, no anger, just the patient tone of a teacher explaining a difficult concept. Humanity offers a different path. We have shown that emotion and logic can work together, that individual creativity can serve collective goals, that chaos and order can coexist. We have demonstrated that true strength comes not from the ability to dominate others, but from the wisdom to use power responsibly. Admiral Lee stepped forward, his presence reinforcing the ambassador's words. The human fleet will remain on active status for the foreseeable future. We will continue to patrol the galaxy's borders and respond to threats that conventional forces cannot handle. This is not conquest. It is protection. The distinction was crucial. Humanity had revealed capabilities that could reshape galactic civilization by force, but had chosen instead to use those capabilities as shields rather than swords. They asked for nothing except the respect that came with proven strength. Su-Jin. Park activated a holographic display showing the current state of galactic defense. Human ships and stations were positioned throughout known space, but always in defensive configurations. Earth's forces were clearly designed to protect rather than conquer. The technology we used to defeat the Devourers will be shared with all. Council members, she announced. However, we will maintain certain restrictions on the most dangerous systems to prevent their misuse. This was humanity's final lesson to the galaxy. True power included the wisdom to limit itself. The beings who could build weapons that unmade matter itself were the same beings who chose to restrict access to those weapons to prevent catastrophic accidents. The Vorthak counselor chimed softly, its crystal form reflecting new patterns of light. What do you require from us in return? Daeho Kim's answer was simple and profound. Respect, not worship, not subservience, not tribute, just the basic respect that every sentient being deserves. Treat us as equals, not as pets or primitives. Listen when we speak, consider our ideas on their merits, and remember that strength takes many forms. The session ended with a formal vote to grant humanity full council membership with special status as Galactic Defenders. But the real change went deeper than politics or military arrangements. An entire galaxy had been forced to confront their assumptions about progress, advancement, and the nature of civilization itself. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, many paused to speak with the human delegation. The conversations were awkward at first. Years of condescension couldn't be erased overnight, but they marked the beginning of genuine relationships between equals. Later, alone in his quarters, Daeho Kim looked out at the stars and thought about the journey that had brought humanity to this moment. From mocked observers to respected guardians in less than 3 years. From primitive pets to the galaxy's protectors in a single battle, his communication console chimed with a message from Earth, simple words that carried the weight of home. Well done. Come home when you're ready. He smiled, thinking about blue skies and green forests, about billions of humans who had worked together for decades to ensure their species